Hey everyone! Welcome back to my channel, Stampcat Stamps, where I share with you the things that I learned from my stamp collection. When we last parted, I had just arrived at Quebec City via ferry boat and climbed a bunch of stairs to see the Samuel de Champlain Monument. Now it's time to take a look at this magnificent building, the Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac. This stamp was issued in 1993 as part of a set showing historic CPR hotels. These hotels were some of Canada's grand railway hotels. Hotels that were built by railway companies to serve the train passengers as they traveled across the country in style. Many were built in the chateauesque style, featuring elaborate towers, spires, steeply pitched roofs, and asymmetrical floor plan. The Chateau Frontenac opened in December 21st of 1893. At the time it was built, ocean liner was actually the main way to travel from Europe to the North Americas, and Quebec City was a very major port, so it was important to have a grand hotel ready to welcome the wealthy passengers as they disembarked from their ships. Since the day that it opened, the chateau was a place of luxury. In 1893, it had central heating, electricity, and a fireplace available in every room, which at the time was very extravagant. This hotel's lavish appearance is aptly reflected in the name of the hotel, Frontenac, after Louis de Baude de Frontenac, who was the governor of New France in the late 1600s and very well known for having a luxurious, over-the-top lifestyle. I have a stamp here of Monsieur de Baude, Count de Frontenac. This stamp was issued in 1972, and actually the image of Frontenac is based off of a statue which is in front of the Quebec City's Parliament building, which I missed seeing, and I was right there. I was literally across the street from this Parliament building. I was distracted taking pictures of this fountain. It is a really nice fountain. Apparently there are all kinds of beautiful statues lining the outside of the building. I didn't know they were there at the time. It was a missed opportunity, but next time for sure. Anyway, the de Baudes were a very prominent family and spent frequent time in the King's Court in France. Frontenac would throw parties so elaborate that they were considered extreme even by the courtiers. In her memoirs, this Mademoiselle de Montpensier, also known as the Grand Mademoiselle, wrote that Louis was vain, boastful, praised everything he owned, his love of new clothes was childish, and he compelled guests to speak admirably about his horses, which were in fact indifferent. Yeah, she really didn't like him very much. But clearly, he was a really over-the-top kind of guy. Here's another stamp that I have of Count Frontenac that shows him in some of his finery. This was issued in 2014 as a part of the Haunted Canada series. Yes, haunted, meaning that some patrons of the hotel have claimed to see the ghost of Count Frontenac wandering the halls in his 17th century garb. I also came across this story about how Frontenac on his deathbed wished to have his heart put in an ornate box and mailed to his fiancée in France, but when she got it, she was too distraught to open it and just sent it back. And that's why his soul is at unrest now, because his true love doesn't have his heart. But I don't know where this story came from. Frontenac died when he was 76, and he had a wife, and actually she outlived him. As far as I know, they didn't divorce, he didn't have another wife or a fiancée, but that's just a fun little ghost story that I heard of him. Frontenac's lifestyle was so extravagant that he began to run into serious problems with debt. He married Anne de la Grange-Trianon, who was nicknamed La Divine, or the Divine, as she was considered to be both beautiful and witty. I know this from a newspaper article in Montreal in 1915. It's actually for a company called Frontenac Breweries, where they named their latest beer flavor after her because, like her, it is divine. Anne was set to inherit a huge fortune from her father, but he disapproved of their marriage. However, they married in secret anyway in 1648. But if Frontenac had planned to escape his debts by marrying into Anne's fortune, he was out of luck. Her father disinherited her and went through a lot of legal trouble to make sure that Anne and his new son-in-law Frontenac got nothing. Frontenac's debts continued to pile up until, fortunately for him, he was offered the position of governor of New France in 1672. He accepted on the condition that while he served in office, creditors would not be able to seize his properties, and he would get to defer his legal responsibilities to pay back his debts. So, how did Frontenac do as the governor of New France? Well, he definitely did whatever he wanted. He built fur trading posts without asking anyone for permission, and it caused all kinds of trade disputes. He tried to impose his authority over matters which he wasn't actually in charge of. Actually, he was removed from his position in 1680 for not heeding complaints about his tyranny. However, a few years later, they did ask for him back to serve a second term as conditions with the Native Americans and other British colonies were worsening. What Frontenac is most famous for is his response during the Battle of Quebec in 1690. This was an attack on the colony New France by the Englishman Sir William Phips, who had sailed up the St. Lawrence to attack them from the colony of Massachusetts. Phips had major issues with his attack. They left really late in the year because they were waiting for supplies that never came. They did not bring a proper navigator with them who knew the St. Lawrence River, and along the way, his crew suffered a smallpox epidemic as well. Nonetheless, Phips sent a messenger to give Frontenac an ultimatum to surrender his city. The messenger was blindfolded, and as he was led up the hill to go see Frontenac, he could hear the sounds of many soldiers training and readying their weapons. This was a bit alarming to him, as Phips and his crew were expecting the Frenchmen to be disorganized and unprepared for an attack. When he reached the room where Frontenac was waiting, they removed his blindfold for him to see Frontenac and all of his officers standing there in their military finery. He delivered his ultimatum to surrender the city within 1 hour and pulled out his watch. Frontenac, by the way, was known to have quite a bit of a temper. One report says he got so enraged he wanted to just kill this messenger and hang him up and show him to the British as his reply. But luckily for him, the Bishop Laval was there who calmed him down and discouraged him from this idea. So instead, Frontenac replied, "I have no reply for your general other than from the mouths of my cannons and my muskets." Now, according to my tour guide at the chateau, this was all a huge bluff. Frontenac didn't actually have that many cannons, and all of these soldiers that the messenger had heard when he was blindfolded were actually just the same group of a few people who were told to keep following him and going around the back streets to make it sound like there was a lot of people. But either way, Frontenac's plan worked. Phips was not able to get into a good enough position to attack him. Winter was also coming early that year, and Phips could not afford to get his boat stuck when the river froze over, so in the end, he had to take his sad team and leave and go back to Boston. The other thing that resulted from this skirmish was that Frontenac decided this city needed a lot more fortifications, many of which are still visible today. One site that I really enjoyed seeing was actually the ruins of Frontenac's former residence, the Chateau St. Louis, the ruins of which are still visible underneath this boardwalk. This is also that building on the stamp that I showed earlier. Chateau St. Louis was the home of 6 governors of New France from 1620 to 1834, when it was then destroyed by a fire. Then, in 1838, they just decided to build a terrace over everything, which is now the Dufferin Terrace. Et voila! Around 2005, they decided to do an archaeological excavation and uncovered over 500,000 artifacts from the past. Now you can go down below the terrace and take a break from all of the crazy kind of touristy hubbub and descend into these quiet, hushed archaeological ruins from another time. So I'm in the Fort St. Louis. Basically, it was like the original fort, and then they built a boardwalk over top of it, and it's been like preserved for 200 years until they just dug it up. Wow. Like the original structures. Cool. So I think this is like the fridge. So I filled that with ice, and then it would keep this stuff cold. This is the governor's hot chocolate mug. Imagine if your favorite mug was like discovered years later and people are all looking at it. It's a wax seal for sealing letters, and this is a lady's hairpin. And of course they found a bunch of bombshells in here. And then there's the chateau. Just look how thick this wall is. It's crazy. There's Frontenac, this famous thing. And that's it. So Frontenac definitely had a really inflated view of himself and pushed around his authority, but honestly, I could say the same for a lot of political leaders back then and even now. He was a larger-than-life guy, he lived like a billionaire, and I think the Chateau Frontenac really reflects that nature. About the hotel that I learned from my tour. The building we see today is a result of 5 different expansions over time. Louis de Baude's coat of arms featured griffins, which are found all over the hotel. The ceilings are hand-stenciled and hand-painted. The 3 restaurants are named Le Sam Bistro, Champlain, and the 1608 Bar to commemorate Samuel de Champlain's founding of Quebec in 1608. This artistic thing on the ceiling is meant to be the St. Lawrence River on its path from here to Montreal. No 2 rooms in the hotel are exactly the same. They all have slightly different layout and decor. If you take the stairs behind the concierge desk to the lower level, you can be treated to a free exhibit about the hotel and also showing some of the artifacts that were uncovered during the excavation. Finally, best for last, on the main floor of the hotel by the elevators is this beautiful golden mailbox. Okay, it's actually brass, not gold, which has some interesting stories. So first of all, this mailbox plays a really big part in a K-drama or Korean drama called Goblin, which came out in 2016. Basically, this guy's a supernatural creature, a goblin, and he's sort of cursed to remain on Earth until he meets his human bride who can end his immortality. He begins this little romance with a girl, and in some of the episodes, he teleports her to Quebec City and they enjoy some time kind of sightseeing. At the end of one of the days, to prove to herself that it all wasn't just a dream, she writes herself a letter and mails it to herself using this brass mailbox. Unfortunately, she doesn't receive her letter for 10 years and still loses her memory about everything anyway. I don't actually know all the details because I didn't watch the whole series. Since the series came out, the number of Korean visitors to the hotel has increased 5-fold, and the mailbox has now become a really popular site to take selfies and send mail. And you can bet I did that. I got my selfies and sent some postcards from this iconic mailbox. Let's hope they don't take 10 years to arrive though. Apparently, the inspiration for this part of the K-drama was based off of a true story. Some years ago, they found a postcard that had been stuck between floors. Each floor in the hotel has a mailbox chute that patrons can mail their letters, and it drops down to the main mailbox in the lobby. The postcard they found was from a soldier during World War II asking the love of his life to wait for him while he was away. Although the hotel staff searched for the true recipient of the postcard, they were never able to track down who it was supposed to go to. Aw, that's such a cute story, but where's the postcard? Like, surely something like this would be on display somewhere, either at the hotel or loaned to a museum, or there'd be a picture of it online. I can't find any information to validate this story that isn't also talking about the K-drama. Even before the K-drama came out, I can't find any newspaper articles or any stories about some postcard being found stuck between the floors. So, I mean, it's possible for sure, but until I see it, I'm suspicious. One last comment about the chateau and philatelic materials. I actually learned this from a comment on my last YouTube video, and I was so sad that I didn't know about it before. There's a post office in Quebec City where you can get a special pictorial cancellation of the chateau. When I saw this cancel, I was so mad at myself for not going in the post office. Again, I was right there, literally outside this building, taking videos and taking pictures. I did not go inside, and the reason this time was because I was searching for food, and when I get that way, not a lot can derail me from my mission. But if I had known that there was such a beautiful cancel you could get in there, I would have come more prepared with some envelopes or some things that I could stamp. So don't be like me. If you get the chance to visit Quebec City, definitely visit the post office and get your cancel. However, luckily for me, not all hope is lost. Even if you don't get the chance to go to Quebec City, you can still get this cancel. Apparently, you just send your philatelic materials with return postage addressed to the postmaster, and they can stamp the mail for you and send it back to you. And this applies for any of the pictorial cancels available in Canada, which I really didn't know was a thing until I got that comment on my video. So thank you so much to RF Coat for your comment and for letting me know all about Canada's pictorial cancels. They're really cool. Okay, that's enough enough for today's video. I hope you enjoyed learning about Louis de Baude, Count de Frontenac, and then his namesake, the Fairmont Le Chateau Frontenac. Stay tuned for one last episode in this series where I talk about my final stamps from Quebec City. As always, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious. Bye!